السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We concluded the last discussion with few observations and insights of Mullah Liqari rahmallah and others on the reasoning and the proof which Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentioned. So Ibn Hajar rahmallah said that فَإِذَا جَازَ الْإِبْدَالِ بِلُغَةٍ أُخْرَى فَجَوَازُهُ بِلُغَةِ الْعَرَبِيَّةِ أَوْلَى. That just as how everyone agrees that you could translate a hadith into a different language, in the same way to translate it or to use different wording in Arabic, all the more reason it would be accepted. Very briefly, to counter his objections, so the first claim is that the translation which is done in other languages, it's done due to necessity, and there is no necessity to make riwayah bil ma'na. Al-Imam Munawi said, قال بعض من لقينا قد يقال إنما جاز هناك للضرورة فلا دلالة فيه هنا. To this we can respond that there is a darura in this case as well, although the darura might not be the same. So there is a darura to make riwayah bil ma'na, but the wajhul qiyas is not necessarily to make others understand. There could be a host of other reasons why the earlier scholars from the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum, why they all felt that it was necessary to alter the words of the hadith. We who are sitting thousands of years later, we cannot now understand their reasoning. And we do not know why they felt the need to do so. But what we do know is that we know how cautious the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum were, and the scholars who came thereafter, how cautious they were in preserving the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and yet they changed the words. So there has to be a valid reason, and that reason must be so great that they would have assumed it to be a darura. So whether we know or not, we have to look at what their practice was. And when we look at their practice, we find that they did make riwayah bil ma'na, and therefore we will have to say that they had some necessity in doing so. The second objection is they're saying that where Ibn Hajar rahmallah is saying that al-ijma' ala jawaz sharh al-shari'a lil-ajam. So they're saying that we have to first establish whether there is ijma' on this here, that you can translate the sharia and the ahadith to other languages. To this we can respond and say that we are not concerned on whether they mentioned anything about this qiyas or not. So what pertains to us is whether they agreed on riwayah bil ma'na. So whether they mentioned anything about jawaz sharh al-shari'a lil-ajam, that's a separate issue. Our issue here at hand is what is the view on riwayah bil ma'na. So why should we go to the second step of determining whether there is ijma' on the maqis alayh, whether there is ijma' on translating a hadith into different languages? Let us rather inspect on this very issue itself, that is the ijma' on riwayah bil ma'na. So bear in mind that Allama Sakhawi is saying it's almost as if there is ijma'. We don't need there to be 100% ijma' to know the permissibility. If you have even 99% of the ummah who are agreeing on it, then it means that whichever hadith you yourself are going to be reading has been transmitted, the meaning of it has been transmitted, because all these scholars, 99% of them, they viewed it as permissible and they practiced upon it. So we don't have to now go very strict on the strict stance of ijma' like what you done in usul al-fiqh. But what we can do is, we can look that whether there is a clear statement or not from the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum saying that it's not permissible. The fact is that we find that Sahaba radiyallahu anhum freely made riwayah bil ma'na. So that's the one thing, that they made riwayah bil ma'na. And then now we're not going to go in a whole usul al-fiqh thing, but no one objected to it. So to very quickly just present 1-2 random examples, Al-Madarmi rahmallah, he brought the chapter Babu man rakhasa fil hadith idha aswab al-ma'na, that the chapter on those who permit narrating a hadith as long as the meaning is the same. So he brings his sanad to Wathilat ibn al-Asqa' radiyallahu anhu, إِذَا حَدَّثْنَاكُمْ بِالْحَدِيثِ عَلَى مَعْنَاهُ فَحَسْبُكُمْ. When we narrate to you a hadith and we're just narrating to you the meaning. فَحَسْبُكُمْ, it is sufficient for you, you can practice upon it. So Sahaba radiallahu anh, the very first link, they are mentioning that they are making riwayah bil ma'na. Then in Mustadrak, even this from Wathilah ibn al-Asqa, Makhul says, دخلت على واثلة بن الأسقع, that we came to Wathilah ibn al-Asqa, and I told him, يا أبا الأسقع حدثنا حديثا سمعته من رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ليس فيه وهم ولا مزيد ولا نسيان. Mention to us such a hadith which you heard verbatim from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You are not adding one own letter of your own. You are not making a mistake, nor have you forgotten it. So Wathilah ibn al-Asqa asked them a question and said, هل قرأ أحد منكم الليلة من القرآن شيئا? Last night, did any of you recite any of the Quran, a little bit of Quran? So they said, نعم, وما نحن له بحافظين. We recited from memory, but we did not memorize the Quran. So then Wathilah ibn al-Asqa told him that فهذا القرآن مكتوب بين أظهركم لا تألون حفظه. You are not worried about memorizing the Quran, and then you are imposing upon us to memorize the ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's saying, think of it realistically. عسى ألا نكون سمعناها إلا مرة واحدة. Probably the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told it to us. That was the one and only time we ever heard it in our lives. Now, how can you impose upon us to remember it accurately, and then now to convey it? So, for example, I'm giving this dars. After this dars, if someone is to ask you now tell us this whole dars, the entire whatever I said in it, لَيْسَ فِيهِ وَهْمٌ وَلَا مَزِيدٌ وَلَا نِسْيَانٌ. It's obvious, it's a huge task which they are asking you to do. So how can you impose it upon the Sahaba? Yes, they were blessed with good memories, but not all of those who narrated had those kind of memories where they would remember 100%. But yes, they would remember the bulk of it. So Sahaba radiallahu anhum themselves, when they heard a statement only once, when they are conveying it in their own words because they could not remember accurately. Now imagine how many statements of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam they heard throughout the day. So thereafter he says, it hasbukum idha ji'nakum bil hadithi ala ma'nat. Just you have to accept it. It's sufficient for you. In Al-Kifaya, Al-Makhatib rahmallah mentions about Abu Sa'id al-Khudri that كنا نجلس إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عسى أن تكون 10 نفرا نسمع الحديث. 10 of us would be sitting with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We have to narrate the hadith. No two of us would narrate it with 100% the exact words because they are all mentioning their own version. So you can just pick up Sihah Sitta, leave alone Sihah Sitta, pick up only Bukhari, and look at the different places. You will find that how Sahaba radiallahu anhum conveyed the words differently. In Tariq Dimashq ibn Asakir rahmallah, he brought his sanad which links to Jabir ibn Abdullah, and he narrates from Hudhayfa radiallahu anhu that inna qawmun Arab nuraddid al-ahadith fa nuqaddim wa nuakhir. So he's mentioning inna, like all of us, that means Sahaba radiallahu anhum. We are Arabs, so we know how to narrate the ahadith. So nuqaddim wa nuakhir, we are not very cautious to use the exact same words. So like we say that there are many practical examples which can be, you just have to go to the books of hadith and you will find these examples. In fact, look at one episode, just go look at one khutbah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Or even one episode, look at the Qissa of Dhul Yadayn, or go look at Salatul Kusuf. Go look at one episode and you can find that Sahaba radiallahu anhum are narrating it in their own words. Now, you do not find any Sahabi saying that, how could you be narrating it like this here? These are the exact words. So, no one in the era of Sahaba denied or rejected or criticized them for making riwayah bil ma'na. Then the next generation, this practice continued, and therefore Allama Sakhawi could say that it is almost as if it is ijma'. If you really apply the principle of ijma', you will see that actually you can say there is ijma'. Yes, there may have been suggestions. So there's a difference, suggestions to rather narrate with a precise wording. But it was never enforced, and it wasn't like strong criticism. You don't have an incident of a person leaving a gathering and saying that Sheikh is only making riwayah bil ma'na, or another person criticizing that don't go and listen from that Sheikh because he's not narrating the words accurately. Just to prove that Sahaba radiallahu anhum would narrate so many times with their own wording. Sheikh Ibrahim Lahim, he says that every time when a Sahabi says, Nahar Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam an kaza, or amarana bi kaza, or kariha kaza, then all of these are riwayah bil ma'na, because he's telling you that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam commanded. But he's not telling you the exact words. How did the Prophet ﷺ command? In English, if you think about it, I can say you must do this. You have to do this here. You should do this here. I'm commanding you to do this. There's so many different ways you can say it. So the Sahabi is not saying the exact words of the Prophet ﷺ. He is just mentioning that the Prophet ﷺ commanded. So this here would be considered as riwayah bil ma'na. Now to look at it. The name of Abdullah ibn Umar is quoted when talking about Sahaba who stress that you should narrate the exact wording. So I told you it was just a suggestion. Because if a Sahabi says, Naha Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, then it means that it's riwayah bil ma'na. So if you open Sahih al-Bukhari, you'll find that, and in fact it's narrated with the golden chain. حدثنا عبد الله بن مسلم قال حدثنا مالك عن نافع عن ابن عمر رضي الله عنه قال نهى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عن النجش. So that's he himself is making riwayah bil ma'na by saying نهى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عن النجش. So that shows that he was merely just suggesting that you should try to narrate the exact wording. But if you at times have to just indicate to a statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam or hint to a prohibition of the Prophet ﷺ, then it is fine. So if an action is done from the time of Sahaba and no one objected on it, and even those who suggested that we should narrate or, with a precise wording, if they themselves are making riwayah bil ma'na, how can we not say that there is ijma'? Now besides all of this here, to give you a totally different argument which Allama Ramahur Muzi rahmallah mentioned, so this here I'm just going to quote the Arabic and you try to understand the Arabic yourself. I'm not going to translate it. وَقَدْ دَلَّ الشَّافِعِيُّ فِي صِفَةِ الْمُحَدِّثِ مع رعاية اتباع اللفظ على أنه يسوغ للمحدث أن يأتي بالمعنى دون اللفظ إذا كان عالما بلغات العرب ووجوه خطابها بصيرا بالمعاني والفقه عالما بما يحيل المعنى وما لا يحيله فإنه إذا كان بهذه الصفة جاز له نقل اللفظ فإنه يحترز بالفهم عن تغيير المعاني وإزالة أحكامها ومن لم يكن بهذه الصفة كان أداء اللفظ له لازما والعدول عن هيئة ما يسمع عليه محظورا. After now he's giving the reasoning. وإلى هذا رأيت الفقهاء من أهل العلم يذهبون ومن الحجة لمن ذهب إلى هذا المذهب أن الله تعالى قد قص من أنباء ما قد سبق قصصا كرر ذكر بعضها في مواضع بألفاظ مختلفة والمعنى واحد. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself is mentioning, quoting Musa alayhi salam. It's all one statement of Musa alayhi salam, but Allah ta'ala definitely knew the words which Musa alayhi salam is going to mention before you could even mention it, leave alone just knowing it. But yet Allah ta'ala makes riwayah bil ma'na of Musa alayhi salam and of Ibrahim alayhi salam and of all the anbiya. So, وَنَقْلَهَا مِنْ أَلْسِنَتِهِمْ إِلَى اللِّسَانِ الْعَرَبِي. Also, not all of them spoke in Arabic. Allah Ta'ala translated it, وَهُوَ خَالِفٌ لَهَا فِي التَّقْدِيمِ وَالتَّأْخِيرِ. So sometimes you will find the same statement of being quoted, but some words are put before, some words are put after. وَالْحَزْبُ وَالْإِلْغَاءُ وَالزِّيَادَةُ وَالنُّقْصَانُ وَغَيْرُ ذَلِكَ. So this is in Al-Muhaddith al-Fasil. So that's another reason to show that Allah Ta'ala is himself made riwayah bil ma'na when quoting other anbiya. If Allah Ta'ala made riwayah bil ma'na when quoting other anbiya, then why can't we make riwayah bil ma'na when quoting our Nabi? Now after mentioning the view of the majority, Ibn Hajar rahmallah now moves on to mention the views of others. So he says, وَقِيلْ إِنَّمَا تَجُوزُ فِي الْمُفْرَدَاتِ دُونَ الْمُرَكَّبَاتِ وقيل إنما تجوز لمن يستحضر اللفظ ليتمكن من التصرف فيه وقيل إنما تجوز لمن كان يحفظ الحديث فنسي لفظهم وبقي معناه مرتسما في ذهنه فله أن يرويه بالمعنى لمصلحة تفصيل الحكم منه بخلاف من كان مستحضرا للفظه. وجميع ما تقدم يتعلق بالجواز وعدمه ولا شك أن الأولى إيراد الحديث بألفاظه دون التصرف فيه قال القاضي عياض ينبغي صد باب الرواية بالمعنى لئلا يتسلط من لا يحسن ممن يظن أنه يحسن كما وقع لكثير من الرواة قديما وحديثا والله الموفق. We read the entire عبارة so that we make take hope for good luck that inshallah we can complete this chapter and we can reach until the end. So here Ibn Hajar Rahmallah is mentioning three other views on riwayah bil ma'na. But this contradicts his style of other chapters, because in other chapters he only mentions the preferred view. In this chapter, leave alone not only mentioning the preferred view, he also mentions three additional views. So he mentions the second view that إنما تجوز في المفردات, in single words, بأن تكون مرادفة. Like for example, you take a synonym, you take a word which has the same meaning. دون المركبات, you can't take a whole sentence. So when it comes to single words, فتغييره يسير مولا القاري رحمه الله says it's a simple, but when it comes to an entire sentence, then there is more alterations which we will be doing. So that ultimately leads to more possibility of distortion and of misquoting, as opposed to just swapping one word for another. So Imam Munawi rahmallah now mentions who had this view. He says, واختاره الخطيب البغدادي ليؤتى بلفظ يدل مرادف مع بقاء التركيب وموقع الكلام على حاله. So this is the second view which is mentioned, that you can only change singular words within the statement. You cannot change the entire sentence or swap the whole sentence around. Then the third view which is mentioned, that إنما تجوز لمن يستحضر اللفظ ليتمكن من التصرف فيه, that it is only permissible for that person who has memorized the exact words. So if at any time he is asked, he can immediately quote the precise words. So maybe he feels that he rather conveys it with these words so that his audience could understand, or for whatever other reason. But if someone had to come there and ask him what's the precise words, he would be able to quote the exact words. Then the fourth view which is mentioned here is that وَقِيلَ إِنَّمَا تَجُوزُ لِمَنْ كَانَ يَحْفَظُ الْحَدِيث فَنَسِيَ لَفْظَهُ, that a person did memorize the hadith. Initially he memorized it. So it's referring with the third one. In this case, that after memorizing it, he now forgot the exact words, but the meaning has remained firmly embedded within his mind. So for him, it is permissible to make riwayah bil ma'na. Why? Because you'll have to look now at the harms and the benefit. The benefit is that you will at least be able to derive the hukam from this hadith. But this here doesn't pertain to a person who remembered the exact words, because he can then quote it with those exact words, and you will still get that maslaha tahsil al-hukm minhu. Allama Munawi rahmallah mentions that this is the view of Allama Mawardi rahimullah. You know, at the senior scholar he was within the Shafi'i madhab. His exact words is إن نسي اللفظ جاز لأنه تحمل اللفظ والمعنى وعجز عن أداء أحدهما فيلزم أداء الآخر لا سيما. So that means he cannot, it's necessary to convey the words and the meaning. But if he cannot convey all, then he must at least practice on what is within his ability. Now we mentioned earlier and also in the last lesson that Mullah al-Qari rahmallah, he differs with Ibn Hajar rahmallah on this mas'ala. So he actually prefers this fourth view. And he says, وَهَذَا الْقَوْلُ عِنْدِي هُوَ الْأَوْلَى حَتَّى مِنَ الْأُولَى, that this fourth view is the best, even it's better than the first view which Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentioned. Why? لأن المرأة ولو كان في غاية من الفصاحة والبلاغة لا ينهض إلى التعبير عن ألفاظ من أوتي جوامع الكلم بما يؤدي معاني أجمع. Even if you can take the most eloquent person in today's time, or you can take the person who mastered Arabic the best, or an expert, undisputed expert, he is an expert, but he can never come close to that being who has been divinely inspired and who has been gifted with Jawami'ul Kalim. So he can never be able to put it in words which are which could match his. بحيث لا يزيد ولا ينقص فلا يتصور بأن يكون مساويا لها في الجلاء والخفاء. Even if you have to look each word which the Prophet ﷺ has mentioned, it has been divinely inspired, so no other words could substitute it. And thereafter he says, لا سيما وهو مفوت للتبرك بألفاظ صاحب الشريعة you're also now getting this, losing this benefit that you can no more make tabarruk with the words of the Prophet ﷺ, and you're also opening the doors of now of doubt and accusations, because people will now accuse you and think that you are misquoting the narration. So this is the view which Mullah al-Qari rahmallah has also mentioned. But as we said, that we have to look at this from the very first link. The Sahaba radiallahu anhum are admitting that they only heard it once. Sometimes they heard it in passing, off the cuff, just in the moment. They could not narrate it. So if you are imposing these kind of laws, then basically there's no hadith. Each and every hadith which has reached you is riwayah bil ma'na. So if you notice here, there are 4 views which are cited, but in spite of there being scholars, it's attributed to them that they regarded it as impermissible. Ibn Hajar rahmallah did not even mention their view. So Allama al-Qani rahmallah complained about this, and he says, الأقوال التي ذكر الشارح في مقابل قول الأكثر كلها قائلة بالتفصيل. That all these 4 views, basically it's permissible, but with this condition, it's just changing the conditions. It's permissible either that the person must be a alim, that's like Ibn Hajar chose, or it's permissible but you can only do it in singular words, or it's permissible but you should at least know it, the exact words by memory, or it's permissible but at least there should be a time when you did try your best to memorize it. So all, the first is that it is permissible. So he's saying وَكَانَ يَنْبَغِي لَوْ يَذْكُرَ مُقَابِلَ الْحَقِيقِ وَهُوَ الْقَوْلِ بِعَدَمِ الْجَوَازِ. They say that it would have been better for Ibn Hajar just to mention that there are 2 views. One is permissible and one is not permissible. Why is he mentioning it like this here? But we can see that Ibn Hajar rahmallah had the wisdom. Because maybe he's not even regarding it, like we're saying that Ibn Umar radiallahu anh, people are attributing to him that he did not regard it as permissible, yet he himself made riwayah bil ma'na. So maybe he did not even think that there were those who held the view that it's necessary to make riwayah bil ma'na, and therefore he did not even indicate to it. But Mullah al-Qari hints to these other views, and he says, ولذا ذهب قوم من أهل الحديث والأصول إلى أنه لا تجوز الرواية إلا بلفظه. Seeing there are a group of scholars of hadith and usul, وهو المروي عن ابن سيرين وغيره من المحتاطين في دين الله. You see, this here is transmitted from Ibn Sirin and others who are very cautious في دين الله. So we can say that others who made riwayah bil ma'na, they were also cautious, if not more cautious. مما يشترط رواه ابن السمعاني عن ابن عمر. But we explain how Ibn Umar radiyallahu anhu has made riwayah bil ma'na. Allama Munawi rahmallah also highlights that this is the view of Abu Bakr al-Razi from the Hanafis. But we can see that these are just a few names which are mentioned. Abdurrahman ibn Mahdi, his name could be also put there. But it's very few names of those who regarded it as permissible to make riwayah bil ma'na. So we make the interpretation that they were stringent upon themselves. That they wanted themselves, when they narrated them for themselves, and maybe their students, they would be stringent that we will narrate riwayah bil ma'na. But they did not impose their view, and they did not even expect others to hold the same view, and therefore they did not make rad. And they even accepted narrations, their own teachers. They traveled, they went, they took out time, when they go sit in front of teachers who themselves were making riwayah bil ma'na. But even if ala sabil tanazzul, we assume that they were against riwayah bil ma'na, then still it was going to be like 0.0001% of scholars who are against it. And their view is going against the confirmed practice of the vast majority. So that means a hadith, if you want to practice upon it, you are going to have to accept riwayah bil ma'na. If you are not accepting riwayah bil ma'na, then every hadith which is there is going to become questionable. So it's also in contrast to scholars who are more senior to them. To sum it up, the preferred view is the first view which Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentioned, and that is the default ruling is that the person must understand the narration and he must be an alim. Hanafis put another view, a ruling which we'll discuss shortly. But Ibn Hajar rahmallah now shows that this is all with regards to permissibility and impermissibility. وجميع ما تقدم يتعلق بالجواز وعدمه ولا شك أن الأولى إراد الحديث بألفاظه دون التصرف فيه. The best is that as much as possible you try to narrate the precise words. So now Ibn Hajar rahmallah, to support this claim of his, he brings the statement of Qadi Iyaz. So he says that ينبغي, the word ينبغي can come in the meaning of يجب. ينبغي سد باب الرواية بالمعنى لئلا يتسلط من لا يحسن مما يظن أنه يحسن. The condition is that a person needs to be عالم بمدلولات الألفاظ وما يحيل المعاني. But a person might think that he is عالم بمدلولات الألفاظ, but meantime in reality he is not عالم. So the exact words of Qadi Iyaz is in إكمال المعلم بفوائد مسلم on page 95. ولهذا روى الحديث الواحد عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم is mentioning that Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they narrated one word, one statement of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم بألفاظ مختلفة في القصة الواحدة. One episode, one incident they are relating it, but with all different wordings. والمقالة الفضة والقضية المشهورة من عهد الصحابة فمن بعدهم. That definitely everyone from the Sahaba radiallahu anhu and after them would make riwayah bil ma'da. Therefore he says, لكن لحماية الباب من تسلط من لا يحسن. So this is how he's mentioning it. So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah is making riwayah bil ma'na of his words. So when trying to show that you should not make riwayah bil ma'na of the hadith, Ibn Hajar is making riwayah bil ma'na of the words of Qadi Iyaz. So these are the words of Qadi Iyaz. لكن لحماية الباب من تسلط من لا يحسن وغلط الجهل في نفوسهم وظنهم المعرفة مع القصور يجب الصد هذا الباب. So he did use the word يجب. Generally Mullah al-Qari rahmallah to tell us that the meaning of ينبغي is يجب. So Ulama Qasim rahmallah commented on this here. يرى نفسه أنه يحسن وليس كذلك. He thinks and he assumes that he have the ability, meantime he doesn't have the ability. And then he says that this is not a tamsak كما وقع لكثير من الرواة قديما وحديثا والله الموفق. It actually happened to lots of people that they made mistakes. Mullah al-Qari says من الأزمنة المتقدمة والمتأخرة, that from the very first, from the very beginning, they made riwayah bil ma'na, and at times, Aisha radiallahu anha, how at times she criticized others. Al-Mazarkashi rahmallah wrote the entire kitab about it. Because it was a few of the criticisms was on riwayah bil ma'na. So it did happen. In Atr al-Hadith Sharif, there's that whole discussion, about performing salah in the masjid. Then is it la shay'a alayh or la shay'a lahu? So that narration, it comes in Sunan Abi Dawud. Man salla ala janazatin fil masjid fala shay'a alayhi. That's how it's in our prints of Sunan Abi Dawud. Fala shay'a alayhi. If a person performs Salat al-Janazah in the masjid, then nothing is, there is nothing against him. So that means it is permissible. But Sheikh Awama then explains on page 43 that this is how it comes in some of the ancient manuscripts, but in other manuscripts it comes with the words فَلَا شَيْءَ لَهُ. So that now alters the whole meaning, because according to the first, alayhi, it means that it's permissible to perform the Salatul Janazah in the masjid. And according to the second, فَلَا شَيْءَ لَهُ, he gets no reward. It will mean that it's not permissible. So you can see what a great impact it had, just making riwayah bil ma'na. And Sheikh Awama in his ta'liqat on page 44, he says that he got this example from Malana Habib Rahman Azmi. Another example which Al-Makhatib rahmallah mentioned. So Ismail ibn Ulayya is the one who's the Madar of the Sunnah, the one who narrates the hadith. His other students, for example, Musa ibn Sahal, when they narrate the narration, they narrated the Siyah. Naha Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ay yataza'far ar-rajul, that a man, they clearly adding this word, ay yataza'far ar-rajul, a male cannot use za'faran. So it's very specified to a male only. However, Shu'bah, when he narrated it from Ismail ibn Ulayya, then he narrated it like this, عن أنس بن مالك أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم نهى عن التزعفر. Now what's the meaning? Males and females, no one can use za'faran at all. So Ismail ibn Ulayya would say that روى عني شعبة حديثا واحدا. Shu'bah, such a stalwart, such a senior muhaddith, narrated from me only one hadith. فأوهم فيه. But even in that one mistake, he made a mistake. He's saying حدثته عن عبد العزيز بن صهيب عن أنس أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم نهى أن يتزعفر الرجل. فقال الشعبة أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم نهى عن التزعفر. You can see that just the riwayah bil ma'na, it's changing the whole ruling. due to this, Ulama Khatib rahmallah says, أفلا ترى إنكار إسماعيل على شعبة رواية هذا الحديث عنه على لفظ العموم في النهي عن التزافر وإنما نهى عن ذلك للرجال خاصة وكأن شعبة قصد المعنى that he intended just to make رواية بالمعنى, and because of that he made this error. So therefore he says فلهذا قلنا إن رواية الحديث على لفظ أسلم من روايته على المعنى. It's better to always, in fact before this here he said فإن كان مما يروي على المعنى دون اعتبار اللفظ فيجب أن يكون توقيع أشد وتحرز أكثر خوفا من إحالة المعنى الذي يتغير الحكم. So it's the safest to always narrate with the exact words. Now it is based on this year that Imam Abu Hanifa rahmallah placed one additional clause. So Sheikh Awama mentions in the Taliqat, he takes it from Fiqh Ahl al-Iraq, that لكن للإمام أبي حنيفة رحمه الله شرط آخر يدرك وجاهته وأهميته من باشر العمل بنفسه والشرط هو أن يكون الراوي بالمعنى فقيها ليدرك الآثار المترتبة على تصرفه بالألفاظ. Imam Abu Hanifa rahmallah would regard it as permissible to make riwayah بالمعنى as long as the person who is doing it is a faqih. So this is the additional clause which Imam Abu Hanifa has added. It was not only Imam Abu Hanifa rahmallah, it's also Muhammad ibn al-Munkadir. Ulama Khatib rahmallah, he concludes the chapter of riwayah bil-ma'na with the words. So I'll just take now a few extra minutes so that this we can complete this chapter. It's no use now stopping and starting the next lesson. Muhammad ibn al-Munkadir, he said, الفقيه الذي يحدث الناس إنما يرقل بين الله وبين عباده فلينظر بما يرقل. So let's see how I can cut short here. The important thing which you have to mention is that what to mention, what not to mention. Okay, so yes, when it comes now to our books in our times, should we make a riwayah bil mana or should we not make a riwayah bil mana? So there's a whole ikhtilaf here. When we do Muqaddamah Ibn Salah, inshallah, we'll go into detail. Ibn Daqiq al-Eid made rad on Ibn Salah rahimahullah. But for here we'll just go now from Alama Munawir rahmallah. He says ذهب المصنف طبعا لجمع إلى جواز النقل من الكتب والدفاتر وإن لم يكن حديثه بالمعنى للعارف, because you're looking at the whole objective. So can you now, when you're narrating from Sahih al-Bukhari or you're narrating from Sahih Muslim, you are narrating from a book, can you make a riwayah bil-ma'na? So some scholars felt that it's not permissible, but others felt that it is permissible, and this has now came down right up until our times. You'll have some scholars who are saying that when you are quoting from a book, then you should not make riwayah bil-ma'na. You will have to narrate the exact wording which is in that book. Sheikh Ibrahim al-Lahim explains the difference between riwayah and merely quoting the source. So he mentions with regards to the view of Ibn Salah, first he mentions the view of Ibn Salah, and then he says, وَأَمَّا الْعَزْوُ الْمُجَرَّدْ فَالَّذِي عَلَيْهِ الْعَمَلُ هُوَ التَّسَامُحُ فِي ذَلِكَ فيذكر الحديث ومن أخرجه وقد يكون الحديث عند جماعة فيعزي إليهم جميعا دون تنبيه. So Imam Bukhari narrated it with different wording, Imam Muslim narrated it with different wording, Imam Tirmidhi narrated it with different wording. So he now comes and he narrates it. He's saying, look at Ibn Hajar rahmallah in Bulugh al-Maram. You'll find that he just gives the source. He doesn't explain that the wording is different. But Al-Malaqani rahmallah said that ينبغي نربا لمن روى بالمعنى أن يقول عقبه إرادة الحديث أو كما قال أو نحو هذا أو مثله أو شبهه أو ما أشبهه بذلك. It is meritorious that a person use this type of words after making riwayah bil mana. So, but we say that you have different scholars who have different views. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Sheikh Hatim al-Oni is of the view that you have to make the exact wording. So this is the view of riwayah bil mana. So the best when you're quoting from a kitab to just memorize the exact wording. But now with regards to all of this here, even whether it's permissible, Ibn Hajar rahmallah is mentioning that it was permissible. There are 3 exceptions. So 2, it's necessary to make riwayat bil alfaz, and the 1 is highly recommended. The first are that if the words are such that you make ibadah with them. So for example, the words of the du'as of salah, so for tashahud, you know every word in tashahud is wajib. So you can't now make a riwayah bil ma'na. Likewise the words of adhan. So Al-Imam Munawi says, كما أنه ليس الخلاف فيما تعبر بلفظ من الأذكار كالأذان والتشهد والتكبير والتسليم. Now you can't make a riwayah bil ma'na there. The second is if the words are tawqif. So for example, it comes to the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they ولا في المتشابه ولا تجوز روايته بالمعنى بل ينقل بلفظه ليقع الإيمان بلفظه من غير تأويل. So for example, if a hadith speaks about yadayn of Allah Ta'ala, of words of Allah Ta'ala, you cannot now change it for another word which also have. So in these two instances, it is compulsory a person has to narrate the exact words. But then there are there's another scenario when it's highly recommended that a person should narrate the exact words, and that is those words which are jawami'ul kalim. So words which were intentionally spoken in a particular way. Because that was the gift to the Prophet ﷺ. For example, ad-dinu an-nasiha. So Imam Nawawi rahmallah gives a few examples. Al-bayyina ala al-mudda'i, etc. Al-gharraj bil-zaman. So all of these words here will have to be a riwayah bil-ma'na. So to conclude this whole thing, that the vast majority of scholars from the time of Sahaba, they regarded it as permissible to make riwayah bil-ma'na if a person knows what he is doing. Imam Abu Hanifa has mentioned that it's permissible if a person is a faqih. For us, when we are narrating from books, it is greatly recommended that we should narrate the exact wording. But if at times you make riwayah bil ma'na, then you should add words like nahwuhu or something like that, or kama qal, etc. And Sahaba radiallahu anhum would also do that. And there are three exceptions when when you have to narrate the exact words. That is, if it is words of ibadah or if it is words which are tawqif, and one when is highly recommended, and that is jawami'ul kalim. Inshallah, we'll continue from here on Thursday. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.